Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here to Integrated Learning Conference today to talk about our experiences here with instruction and how we have dealt with instruction during the pandemic. My name is Michael Stein. I'm the instructional technology coach at the Berks Career and Technology Center, and my co-host is Rochelle Rudy.
And I am also an instructional technology coach at the Berks Career and Technology Center. And welcome to our presentation. Thank you for joining us.
So what we're going to be talking about today is looking at the way in which we were conducting and doing instruction at the Berks Career and Technology Center, kind of pre-COVID, and when things kind of went down in the spring, and how we kind of evolved over time with trying to kind of contend and deal with all the different dynamics that we dealt with at the Career Center. Just to give you a little bit of background on Berks Career and Technology Center, we are in Berks County, PA, and we service 16 different districts in the county of Berks. So we have a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that were going on, even on a regular traditional instructional day. And now with what's going on with the pandemic and what we've been doing since last spring has really made things complicated. But what we're going to kind of review here today is we're going to talk about some of the instructional model evolution of how we kind of dealt with things and how things have transpired and evolved in the classrooms. And then also talk about a couple of case studies and some things that the instructors are kind of experiencing, and kind of share out with you some of the different things that they've used in the current online environment for teaching. So we've basically gone through 4 different evolutions, if you will, of instruction in the classroom. Now, pre-COVID, we had in-person instruction, where everything was pretty much traditional as we know it. Virtual, where when we had the lockdown, everything went online. And then we evolved kind of preparing for the summer, and then coming into fall, we evolved into hybrid, where we were doing instruction, asynchronous learning, and so forth. And now what we're doing is more of a high flex or concurrent teaching model. And I'm going to kind of talk about each one of these as we get started here this morning. So obviously for pre-COVID, before everything kind of got all crazy with things in the spring, everything was in person. And our situation in a traditional classroom, where the students had access to all the equipment in the building, they were able to do face-to-face interaction with the instructors, work with the equipment and things. And the way that we kind of had everything built out when it comes to our curriculum delivery is we have learning guides and our curriculum standards and all the different things. But for the most part, everything was distributed in person, whether that would be electronically distributed online in our LMS, or we would use a paper learning guide or books and physical things that the students would be using in the classroom. Student services and support systems were all readily available, just like it would have been any other year in the past. When it comes to the instructors and the support from the building administration, all of the traditional things are also in place. Administrators and instructional coaches would be able to work with the instructors in the classrooms. We could hold meetings and different things in person. And as you know, it was just pretty much that what now feels like a long forgotten way in which we all used to interact. Now, what happened is we get into spring and everything closed down. And in our situation, everything kind of closed down with very little warning. So a lot of the students were without some of their materials when it comes to learning materials like books and different things of that sort. But what happened is we ended up kind of closing down and working basically behind the scenes, scrambling, if I will say, that to try and get everything worked out so that the students would have access to the materials. And we basically had about a week and a half where there was a lot of planning, where everybody didn't really know what was going on. And we decided to hold some in-service before we started up again, before we went into virtual, got everyone kind of set up so that everyone could do everything online, and tried to, as quickly as possible, build out all of the instructional materials that we had available for the students in more of an online format. And that took a lot of work to get there. Luckily enough for us, we had already adopted a learning management system. We were using Schoology, and we were about 3 years into onboarding everyone, and we had about 50% participation at that point. But this virtual environment basically forced everyone into 100% participation. So we had half of our staff had to kind of bring up to speed and convert all of their materials online. So everything was built out. We had to put everything together basically in 3 days and build everything the night before with some of these instructors. So once that lockdown occurred, we were able to, or once the buildings were locked down, the instructors couldn't get in. But once we started teaching again, everything had to be done virtually. And a lot of things had to happen behind the scenes, equipment-wise. The school district prepared and presented the students with computers and laptops and Wi-Fi connections and different things. And we were lucky enough to get a large majority of the students up and online and able to communicate with us. Now, how the teachers went about doing that was, again, through the learning management system. And one of the main things that they tried to use to do that was facilitating the interaction with Schoology conferences inside of our Schoology LMS. Now, when all this was happening, we did have obvious limitations. We could not access materials and equipment. Students couldn't work with things. So everything that we were doing was completely theoretical based in most cases. And it was very difficult to kind of do the kind of teaching that we do best in CTE. To help facilitate some of the learning obstacles that we had, we set up some virtual learning centers so that the students could work with the special ed department and instructional assistants to kind of work through some of the things that the students were struggling with in the classrooms, particularly in this new virtual environment. When it came to how we worked with the instructors and got everything running, we utilized our Office 365 teams to do daily coaching. We basically held an hour every morning to provide technical support, if you will, and training for everyone to teach in that online environment. We also conducted weekly question and answer sessions to allow the instructors to voice out any of concerns and things that they had during the time that they were teaching during that week, so that they would get the ear of administration and allow administration to understand what concerns and issues they might have been having, as well as faculty meetings that we would have on a regular basis. But again, all of these would be conducted in that virtual environment through using Office 365 Teams. We also had some limitations with special education support, because of it being online and trying to facilitate what was going on there. Some of our sending districts and to try and get everyone on the same page and communicating was difficult. So virtual in our environment, as much as we survived it, I would say, that rather than thrived in it, we were able to get past it and move through. But it very much set us up for what we were going to be doing then this fall. Opening in 2020, we moved into hybrid, and the classroom setup was one where we were teaching in person, and then we had online materials that were kind of available for students to access and work on. All of the instructors were in building, and so the students because it was half time, or potentially not even at all, or 1 day a week, had part-time access to the instructors and the equipment. So it made it difficult for them to work through and get a lot accomplished. So instruction was limited. Materials were not quite available as they would be if we were still in person, but they still did have some access to things. So we were able to get more hands-on work done. But because of hybrid, And because of having 16 different schools, we had a very chaotic teaching schedule. And the students really struggled to try and kind of keep up with their peers because of some days they'd be in, some days they'd be out, and they'd be working asynchronously on some of their coursework. So it was very difficult to kind of facilitate that. The teachers had a lot of, trouble trying to maintain pacing and keeping the instruction going in a manner that allowed the students to kind of progress through with their peers and keep working on things. So it was very limited in how we were able to get through and support the work that the students were doing when they were doing things online. When we were in the hybrid, it was able to allow the teachers to participate in person with their equipment. So it was something different than virtual, because when we were virtual, we weren't able to get in the building. The instructors were able to utilize the equipment, make videos, and support some of their learning, but it still wasn't ideal because of the offsetting schedule and the students not being able to access it. So it still isn't perfect. When we built out the hybrid system, we did kind of isolate Wednesdays, and that allowed for more support and preparation by our teachers so that they could go through and prepare materials for the course week to put things up online to support those that were working from home.
Mike, I just want to interject and say that while all of that was going on, there continued to be the end of the day question and answer session for teachers. And I think that really helped them, especially with a lot of anxiety that they had when they had full control of a class a year ago. And now it's kind of like some students were showing up, some weren't. So administration holding those question and answer sessions at the end of the day really did help during that period of time.
Yeah, we had a lot of feedback from the teachers, and really what was critical during the time when we went through spring and we had those, and then going in here to the fall, is that dialogue with administration from the teachers really helped a lot to allow those teachers to feel as though they were involved in the process of how things were being built out and how they were participating, and it allowed the administration to help make decisions based upon what they're hearing from what's going on in those classrooms. It was much more difficult during virtual for the administration to pop in and see what was happening in an online classroom because of the scheduling and everything kind of being happening at certain times during the day and things that weren't happening during other times of the day, as opposed to when you're in building and they could just walk down the hallway, pop into a class and see what's going on and kind of interact with and see what's happening in the classroom. As we kind of went through hybrid in the beginning of the fall and we got into the school year, we started to evolve a little bit. And I like to say that we are no longer in a hybrid environment, but we're kind of more in what is known as a high flex environment, or a concurrent instruction. High flex is more of a flexible course format where the instructors are able to combine their face-to-face interactions with their online learning. So what happens is the teachers are teaching in person with the students. The students are also logging in and participating through a live video feed, and as though they are actually in the classroom. Our traditional hybrid model was more asynchronous, where the students were not actively participating in the dialogue that was happening during those theories. And now with the ability to kind of broadcast and share out those through video feed, the students using the Schoology conferences and or the Office 365 teams were able to directly participate and stay in pace with these classroom. As I said, we had 16 different sending districts, and I know it's very difficult to see, but then it's a lot of information that's kind of on the screen there. As you can see, the 16 districts all had different attending schedules. Some would attend on a Monday, Tuesday, and then be virtual for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Some would be virtual for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then be in person on Thursday and Friday. And it would be a variety of different scenarios based upon the sending district schedules that they were running. So trying to even run a hybrid model where we had the ability to kind of control when they were coming in and when they were going to be doing asynchronous was a little more difficult than we expected. And we kind of evolved into this concurrent instruction to allow the students to participate in person. So when we were doing the high flex, the advantages that we have with this is that the students now have more time with the equipment and the instructor. Now, the equipment obviously is somewhat limited, but as we're going to talk about in some case studies in a moment, the equipment kind of became a little portable too, depending upon the program. The chaos that we had with the schedule is a bit more controlled now and keeping all the students with pacing because of the high flex, because they are able to participate in what's happening in that particular classroom during that day. If it's a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever theory might be being dispensed by the instructor, those at home can keep in pace. And then when they come back into the classroom for their in-person day, they are able to just hit the ground running and work with that equipment and get that hands-on activity. This also allowed us to be more conformative to the sending district schedules. And like I just showed you in that chart a moment ago, that was very difficult to try and pin that down. Every district wanted to do things the way that they needed to do things, and we were not in the driver's seat of making those decisions. So we are the ones that had to adapt, and the high flex environment allowed us to have more capability to do that. We continue to kind of mirror the same thing that we had with the access to the equipment, but when it comes to the schedule with Wednesdays, we were able to keep Wednesdays clean and allow for the instructors to have more time to support and prepare for the theories and classroom days that they were going to have when the students were in person and online. So from a technology standpoint of how did we support all of this, and one of the questions that you might think about is, well, how are they able to do this and keep all of the students online and engaged and functional? We're very supported by our sending districts. This districts supplied all of their students with equipment from their schools. Now, that in of itself gave us all sorts of interesting problems because not every district was using the same equipment, but we were able to work around many of those issues, and something that we've kind of been dealing with for a couple of years now. Some schools will have iPads, some schools will have Chromebooks, some schools will have laptop PCs, and we established prior to COVID, a bring your own device network policy so that the students were all coming in and using their own equipment in building. And then obviously when they were at home, they were using the same equipment. So it was a little difficult, but we got through it to try and get everything linking up and serving the information out to them in the same manner. Kind of getting our software and online curriculum and communications using different tools that would enable that to happen across those different type of platforms or different computers was the struggle. But we kind of tried to stay as much as possible using the tools that were web-based and were used through a typical web browser, as opposed to anything that was going to require an application to run on each of the computers. When it came to what our expectations were, when we began and got to the point where we were doing the high flex instruction, The synchronous and asynchronous expectations for the students were that they were to be participating and logging in every day, whether that was in that asynchronous model where they maybe had assignments and so forth, that we would track whether or not they were participating for the day through might be daily questions or discussion boards or different things like that. Or if it were synchronous and there was a live class being broadcast at a certain time and they had to log in at that time and participate. And that was juggled by the instructors, and the autonomy there is knowing their student schedules and getting them online every day so that they would get the information that they needed to be able to learn. When we got into the online live classes and trainings, we did some class trainings depending upon the program with some of the students to get them participating. And in the evening, we also had some Zoom sessions to help the parents learn how to facilitate logging in and checking grades in our LMS and doing different components within our SIS to check for student progress and that the students were getting their work done. So it was not just necessarily the students that we were working with, but also the parents and getting them up to speed with online learning. As I was kind of mentioning a few other times during the presentation, we did already have an established digital curriculum delivery process using Schoology and tying it into our Office 365 environment. The new thing that we had was using conferences in Schoology, which is a built-in application to allow you to do online conferences. There's whiteboards, you can share out screens, show videos and different things, as well as using our Office 365 Teams for more direct one-on-one support meetings with instructional assistants and students. We also began to rapidly look into acquiring digital versions of all of our textbooks and working with publishers to integrate all of the online materials that they have available that for the book editions that the instructors are using in their programs. We also provided all of the instructors with live video cameras. Each one of the programs was provided in the fall with a Logitech HD digital web camera that they were able to tie into their instructional process for delivering live online theory. And we have provided them with screen recording software to allow them to record what they're doing with the students on screen, so that if students were unable to participate, they could go back or remediate and look at the video presentation to recapture what it is that they may have missed. We also went, go ahead.
If I could just jump in, everything that Mike is talking about is absolutely wonderful for our teachers, but please understand that this was not a super smooth process. There were a lot of learning curves for our teachers, so there was a lot of support that had to be given for them when the web cameras came in. You know, teachers needed to learn how to use them. It wasn't just, here you go, here's the camera, and they automatically knew what to do, and they learn, you know, what's the best angles. Sometimes a student would be online saying, wait, you got to turn it this way. We can't see. So it wasn't a smooth transition with all of this technology. There were a lot of bumps in the road, but between Mr. Stein and administration, things are kind of smoothing out, and you kind of get the sense now that a lot of our teachers are feeling more comfortable with the technology that was very quickly handed to them.
Yeah, and by no means am I don't mean to paint the picture as though this was flip the switch and everything was smooth sailing. There was a lot of training that was involved. We had summer trainings that we provided the instructors We did a lot of things during the trainings that I mentioned earlier in the spring with the morning sessions, basically every morning from 8 to 9 o'clock or 9 to 10 o'clock, depending on the day. I spent an hour online broadcasting to all of our instructors to give them trainings on how to use all of our equipment and how to use the online delivery model and software and things. And I cannot say enough about the instructors and their willingness to participate and kind of get into and dig in and learn all of this stuff. And to a certain degree, and by no means am I saying this from the standpoint of, oh, it was great that we had a pandemic, but it was really great that we were forced into this model because it brought all of our instructors and our students up to speed on so many different aspects of delivering curriculum, whether that's in person and online, and juggling between these two systems in a way that never would have happened if they were not forced to do it. Now, by no means is that a justification that we like the pandemic at all. That is not the case. But from the standpoint of the silver lining in all of this, if there would be one, is that our teachers now are more equipped and more capable than they ever would have been before using technology in the classroom. It basically, we had a timeline of about 2 years before the pandemic began to get all of our instructors using our learning management system as the new curriculum development model. And that 2-year progression basically was condensed down to 3 months. And everyone stepped up and everybody really put forth an amazing amount of effort to get themselves to the place where they were able to function in this environment. So on that point, once that started and we got that established with the learning management system, with Schoology, and getting all the curriculum out there, many instructors had begun to branch out and started to look at other online learning software that we were able to integrate into the learning model. And so within Schoology, we were able to acquire Edpuzzle, Quizlet, embed some Kahoots, do all sorts of other things to enhance the online learning experience. And many instructors have adopted some of these things and they use them constantly to engage both the students that are in the classroom and the students that are at home and participating online in real time. So that being said, please, if you have any questions about what it is that we kind of ran through, and that was just more like the history of what we were dealing with, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the case studies and look at some of the programs and talk about some of the tools that we were kind of zipping through here as we were talking about the transition between the 4 different environments we were learning in. Please post any questions in the Q&A and we'll address all the questions after we go through these case studies and kind of answer anything that you might be curious about and what we experienced. So I'm gonna get started here and talk about how we kind of utilize and what it kind of looks like in regards to the online and in-person connections with Schoology and conference and teams. The online conferences and teams that the teachers were doing now currently in this HyFlex environment was utilized by taking the Logitech cameras and connecting everything into their computers. They throw their presentations up into a digital screen. The students in the classroom were able to participate and see the digital screen. That digital screen is also then being broadcast to those students that are participating online, and they're participating online through Schoology conferences or Microsoft Teams. And this online environment, you walk into any of our classrooms and you go in and you'll see the cameras all set up and the TV is running with the broadcast. And you can kind of see in this image here, you can see the students at home in they're participating and watching just as though they were sitting live in the classroom. They interact with you, they can speak and ask questions, and it goes through and the teacher hears them and they communicate in almost the exact same manner as them physically being in the room. And this is really the apex of where we were looking to get to when it comes to the online teaching environment, because we basically now were able to eliminate the distance between them being at home or being in the classroom to everyone getting the same experience when that lesson's being dispensed. This is also very good for creating the daily check-ins, and the students were expected to be online and on during the entire session of class. So if our class starts when I think about 8:30, most of the classrooms require the students to be online, and they're online until the end of the class, which is typically somewhere around 10:30 in the morning. Same thing happens then in the afternoon. Any questions that a student might have, the teacher can answer it in real time. The teacher may post questions that the students would have to answer or participate in, and they can log in first thing in the morning, and they can provide that answer and interact with the teacher and get their marching orders, if you will, for the day. What we noticed in this environment, by bringing the cameras into the classroom and allowing everyone to interact, it made a much more cohesive class experience for the students and the instructors, versus the hybrid model where everyone was asynchronous and kind of just doing an assignment and learning kind of independently.
If I just interject here, there were some caveats to this, though. Teachers were finding that some students would show up virtually, but they'd be, in their bed in their pajamas. And so there were some guidelines and rules that needed to be enforced with the instructors, so that the students knew that it was time for school, and the expectation was that they looked ready for school. So teachers don't need to see what a student's bedroom looks like or things like that. So it was, you need to be dressed, you need to be sitting up, be mindful of what's on camera around you, those sorts of things. So teachers did find some problems with that in the beginning, and then realized that there needed to be some rules attached to virtual learning.
Yeah, very much so. And with that, it was something where we instilled upon the students that when you're online and you're here at the Career Center, just like when you're in person in the Career Center, you are preparing and being trained for work. And we treat everyone in the classroom as though they are at work. So the inference there is, if you're online, you are online and you are also at work. So you have to be a professional. One of the questions that we've received here in the Q&A, and I'm just going to address that while we are talking about this here at the moment, is during the spring when we were going all virtual, we did have discussions about how to handle online video and the legalities behind the students being on camera and participating online and stuff like that. And we sought counsel, we got some information from them. We came out with a policy for how we were going to handle the students and how they were going to participate online. And we got a sign-off release that every one of the parents then had to sign off for those students to participate in the online environment. So that was all kind of considered and kind of came up in the spring, and now it's just baked into everything that we do when it comes to the student handbook sign-offs and everything that we're doing here in the fall. Another kind of case study here of what we wanted to talk about, that many questions that we have had in the past is when we're doing online asynchronous material, how can we provide a realistic understanding that the students participate and actually watch their videos? And that's kind of something that we have contended with in the past, because we were looking at trying to start a flipped classroom environment where students would do some of their online learning at home for homework and come into the classroom and then have more time to spend doing hands-on. And that kind of built into what we experienced here with the pandemic. we created, or many of our classrooms started creating self-paced videos that they had the students watch that had embedded questions in them for checking for understanding. And Edpuzzle is a tool that some of the instructors gravitated towards to facilitate this. The students basically watch a video, and the teacher can go into that video with Edpuzzle and put questions embedded in the video that have to be answered for them to be able to progress forward and watch more of the video. Those questions actually tally up and creates a grade in Edpuzzle with a gradebook. And that Edpuzzle gradebook, we are linking back into Schoology and pushes the grades over into the Schoology platform and records the progress for the students that they participated and that they watched their material and got graded. So those videos can be self-created. If you look in the picture here, the instructor is actually talking about one of his own videos. He was talking about the content and the questions and remediating with the students when they were in person about the stuff that they watched the night before. And these videos can be recorded by the instructors and put into Edpuzzle, or videos can be taken from YouTube if you find a wonderful resource from a third party, and then you can bring that and import it into Edpuzzle, skin your questions into it, and then the students can watch the video and you can check for understanding as they go through and watch those videos. So this was found to be a very powerful tool because of the online hybrid kind of environment and the asynchronous learning model that we were experiencing over the summer and in this early part of fall. And some of the teachers still use now the Edpuzzle and are really interested in continuing to use this more for homework when they're not dealing with the students in person.
All right. So our next case study has to do with discussion boards. And actually this started last spring when teachers were kind of struggling to bring some sort of routine to a very difficult situation. One of the ideas that came forward was to actually pose a daily question online for all students to answer. So it may have had something to do with what was taught the day before, or think about what's coming up and what we're going to be learning about. And despite wherever they are, they know that every day they need to log on and answer a daily question. It doesn't really matter where they are. These items could be graded by the teachers, and I believe that almost all of our teachers do still use a daily question to get the teaching started. So whether they're introducing a new idea, reviewing what was taught before, it is a way for teachers to just get the day started and give some sense of routine to the students. Another way to use the daily question also is almost like a journaling type activity. So some teachers have turned it into not always necessarily having to do with what's going to be taught, but hey, how are you doing through this pandemic? That I saw a lot of that in the spring. And just sort of a check-in, you get a feel for how your students are doing, because we all know that it's very important for us to get our information to them, but sometimes it's just as important to kind of get a feel for how are your students doing during this difficult time, especially at home. And we all heard, you never know what home life is like. So a daily discussion can do a lot more than just help get students thinking about what they're learning, but also give them a chance to kind of think about what is happening in their life, depending on how the teacher wanted to use the daily discussion.
Yeah, and this actually also then tied very well back into our academics, because we have had for years now an initiative for Collins writing. So your type 1, type 2 Collins writing falls really well into these discussion boards, whether it's graded or even not graded, for prompts of things that might be curriculum related, or as Rochelle was just discussing, just daily check-ins and seeing how things are going.
All right. In this case study, really, it was just how can we get all of the students involved at one time. And this teacher in particular, she did a great job incorporating Quizlet Live into her classroom. So students who were with her and students who are online could all be very competitive in answering questions on the lesson that was taught that day or the day before. And I actually was able to observe this in action. And I have to tell you, it was a very exciting time. Like her virtual students were just as engaged as her students who were present in the classroom. And it is a great way for all of the students to kind of know that they're still all together in this, even if they don't get to see each other every day. Another point to Quizlet Live is that she can then take all of these results from this and help to understand, you know, where the students are in their learning. And it's much easier when you have students in your classroom to kind of gauge where they are. But when your some students are virtual, it's not as easy to get a good picture of, are they really getting it or are they not getting it? And using Quizlet Live was just a way for her to really get the students engaged. And it was a fun time. I mean, when times are tough and you need to get information out to students and then kind of give a formative assessment, this was a great way for her to do that.
Yeah, and having witnessed this and showing this as a best practice within just our school network here, we had convinced administration that this is such a valuable tool in this situation that they have agreed to allow us to get a site license so that all of our instructors are able to get this and integrate it into their classroom and online teaching so that everyone can participate in the same kind of manner. Now, just like anything else, from a technology coach background thing, is that just because we find something that works well in one environment doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work well in all environments. And the other side of things with that is you can't continuously just use this exclusively and make this the one and only thing that you use, because then the students will become kind of tired and through repetition bored with it. And so we do emphasize that this is not the thing that you should be using. We have like the Edpuzzle, there are assessments in Schoology, there's the Quizlet Live, there's Kahoots, there's all sorts of different tools that can be used in conjunction with the online or in-person learning.
All right, this probably is my most exciting takeaway, even for all teachers, where it is possible. And this is, we had one of our health occupations instructors actually start this. And when she told me that this is what she was doing, I actually just started going around to other classrooms where it was appropriate and suggested this as an option. And basically what she had done is she thought of all the materials that students could safely take home to use when they were actually doing virtual, because remember, we have students who will come maybe 2 days in person and then 2 days they are virtual, or 3 days they're virtual. So she actually created take-home kits with supplies in there so that the students could actually participate in live demonstration, and they could also actually practice at home, take pictures, send them to the teacher through email or upload them into Schoology so that the teacher has evidence that they are practicing at home. So within her supply kit, she had eye charts made, gloves, wraps, bandages, all kinds of supplies for the students to actually practice at home, because in a tech center, we're very much hands-on, and some students don't have everything. And considering the pandemic, it's not always easy to go out and find all of the supplies that you would need to actually practice. So in this case, she put them together and had the students take them home. There are other classes that have done that. We had our SMART program who also put a take-home kit together. And of course, it's not feasible for all tech classes, but definitely something that helped the students who are virtual kind of feel like they're still getting the hands-on learning part at home. And I know just from talking to some of the instructors that have sent home these kits that the students are commenting that they really are happy to have them so that they can practice and not just get the verbal instruction, but do the hands-on portion and be able to get their credit for it, um, just as the students who get to be at BCTC every day.
Yeah, and there are other examples here, just so you don't think that it's the medical professions, but take-home kits were capable of being put together through our horticulture program that we're doing floral arranging and different things of that sort. You could look at your culinary, where ingredient packets could be gathered together that could be taken home, and the students can work on things like making dough and kneading dough and stuff like that. So it all depends upon you working with the instructors in those classrooms and kind of identifying where something like that, since it is supply based, you have to be cognizant of, do you have enough of those supplies? But most of the classrooms, when you are dealing with something like that, they're going to be using up those supplies in class anyway. So they typically will be have enough material that each student would be able to take some of that home. So those are some of our case studies, and I wanted to kind of take a moment and just again praise the teachers we have here and what it is that they accomplished over the virtual time period and then during this fall. Just to give you some ideas of how they have stepped up and participated here, the spring virtual time, and again, the instructors really didn't have a lot of materials built out. About half of our instructors were using our online system at the time. Just to give you some idea, they created close to, well, just shy of 20,000, but 18,885 individual course materials as a school. So we have 36 programs, about 50 classroom instructors, 1,900 students, and the amount of volume of work that they put in statistically here, and going into the analytics and looking at things in our learning management system and pulling some of these numbers out was astonishing. You know, nearly or 430,000 items being viewed by the students, and that only captured that, like if something is viewed multiple times within like a half an hour, it kind of omits that from the statistics. 70,000 items were submitted for grading during that time period online. Here in the fall, now that we've gone into this hybrid HyFlex, the impression was, oh, maybe this is going to kind of go down a little bit because we're no longer going to be entirely in a virtual environment. And actually, in a fewer number of weeks, so with virtual was about 11 weeks, this was, I think, closer to 9 weeks between the beginning of the school year and last week. They've actually created even more items in a shorter amount of time and had more student engagement with the materials and items being graded. So once they kind of learned how to do everything in that virtual environment in the spring, and they kind of got all their training and everything else that was going on over the summer and building up to this fall, they really stepped up their game and participated and created tons of materials for the students to interact with and work with, and get them all engaged in their learning, whether they were in person or at home and online. So that pretty much takes us to, what is it? We've got about 10 minutes left. And if anyone has any questions, there's the Q&A section that they can throw questions out to us and we can go through and answer anything. But that's pretty much what we wanted to share out for the morning. I did see one question in the web chat room in which they're asking, how did we enforce the online dress code, and have we a document that outlines those expectations? I'll just go ahead and answer that one, in that we do have daily work ethic, and the instructors go through and they can, just like in the classroom, deduct participation points, work ethic points for the students and their behavior and how they function online and in the classroom. In addition to that, then when it comes to what those expectations were each set for the most part by the instructors in each classroom. So they can determine what those expectations were. Now, obviously, the expectation is more like to be dressed business casual or something like that. While on the meetings, it's not something where if it's in a construction classroom, they're expecting them to be in their construction gear and stuff like that. But they had to be presentable and ready for the day as if they were in a regular classroom setting.